Sunday. Here's Sam Donaldson.
Good evening. It was all sweetness and light from the city of light, Paris, this Sunday as President Bush and other Western industrial nation leaders ended their summit meeting. By most accounts, a successful, harmonious, certainly self-congratulatory affair. But one that was nonetheless not immune from a bit of upstaging by that champion of geopolitical PR, Soviet leader Mikhail Gorbachev. Details of the summit wind-up from White House correspondent Britt Hume.
So easily had this final day gone that before it was over, the president was chatting and posing for pictures with reporters after leading them on a brief tour of the baronial U.S. ambassador's residence in Paris. There had been little to divide the leaders at this summit, and little did. The final communique, summarized by French President Mitterrand, basically said the rich countries of the West were doing well, but should do better on inflation, budget deficits, trade imbalances, and helping poor countries. It also urged them to try to clean up the world's environment. Of more interest to Mr. Bush, who had just been to Poland and Hungary, was a promise of help for Eastern European countries trying to reform their politics and their economies. It wasn't a specific commitment, but at a news conference this afternoon, the president said it was good enough for him.
Let there be no doubt, there was unanimity that we should address ourselves to the problems of Poland and Hungary, and so I was not disappointed.
Much of the questioning, however, was about Mikhail Gorbachev, who had grabbed the summit spotlight by saying in a letter to Mitterrand he wanted the Soviet Union to join the world economy. The president said that would take some doing.
The Soviet economy needs a lot of work, and I say that not to be critical, but certainly that's an objective judgment. The economy is in bad shape, far worse shape than the Western economies.
And he said there's also the question of the Soviet political system.
And as soon as we see the manifestations of freedom break out there in terms of demonstrably free elections all over, then we start talking about democratic change, and then the day approaches.
Privately, administration officials and other Western leaders were annoyed by the Gorbachev letter, regarding it as a publicity stunt. If it was, it worked. One thing that did not work today was a gate outside the American cathedral here where the president went to church. Not even a squad of security men could force it open to let the Bush motorcade out. Fortunately, there was someone with access to higher powers, or at least a better idea how the gate worked. He got it on the first try. This is the first time one of these summits has ended early, and there were questions why the leaders hadn't stuck around to work on some more problems. The president said, quote, they were running out of gas. They had also run through their agenda and would have had to take up issues they hadn't prepared for. Britt Hume, ABC News, Paris.
Soviet leader Gorbachev's intrusion into the Western love fest may have been maddening, but it was another example of both the competition and promise of the new East-West relationship. Our veteran foreign affairs correspondent Barry Dunsmore is standing by in Paris. Barry, Secretary of State Baker said today that someone said this is the first summit that has not had to deal primarily with the threat of communism, but with the consequences of its failure. You're the one who said it. What'd you have in mind?
Well, really what I had in mind is that in the past, they've always been worried about what the Soviets were going to do about this and what the Soviets were going to do about that. This time, they're worried about communism falling apart in Hungary and in Poland and in China and maybe even in the Soviet Union itself. And if that were to happen, there would be some very serious consequences. And they've made some decisions about what they might be able to do in some of those places, and I think that really changes the complexion not only of summits like this, but of the whole nature of East-West relations.
Let's talk about Poland and Hungary, two nations that President Bush visited. He said that the summit partners agreed with him that an infusion of new money was necessary, but no one came up with new money. How are they going to do that without the actual cash?
Well, first of all, they're going to have a meeting very soon, Sam, in which they're going to talk about specific money. But one of the things they are already going to do is to forgive a lot of the debt, give them some time not to have to pay interest. That could amount to several $1 billion, and that's fairly significant money in and of itself. I think at that meeting they're going to decide on food aid in Poland and some other ideas which will encourage private enterprise in both Poland and in Hungary, and that will make a difference in both places.
They spent a lot of time talking about the environment, Barry. Have they come up with a plan to try to solve those problems?
I don't really think so. 22 of the 40 points of the summit had to do with the environment. They said all the right things, but I'm not sure they've really come to grips with it. Margaret Thatcher pretends that she's a green, but this is pretty late coming in her career, and I think that still remains to be seen.
Thank you very much, Barry. Barry Dunsmore. One final summit note. Next year, it is the United States' turn to play host to the economic summit, and President Bush was asked today if he might not like to hold it in Texas. The president said that was a distinct possibility, adding with a grin that the fact that Secretary of State Baker is from Houston, and he, the president, is from Houston, and Secretary of Commerce Mossbacher is from Texas, should have nothing to do with it. His answer seemed to satisfy the reporter who asked about it, Carl Lubsdorff of the Dallas Morning News.
World News Sunday, brought to you by Mountain Grown Folgers Coffee.